Am I the a-hole for telling my wife that if we open our marriage, I will eventually leave her for someone else? We've been married 5 years. No kids. Both 30. Both professionals. I honestly thought we were the gold standard for our friend group. We had the house, the stable careers, the shared hobbies, and a rhythm to our lives that felt unbreakable. I was happy. I thought she was too. There were no red flags, no history of stepping out, no major arguments about our future. We were a team. Or at least, that's the story I told myself every morning when I woke up next to her. Things have been tense between us lately and I'm not sure why. It started small, a coldness in her voice when she'd answer the phone, or the way she'd stay in the bathroom for an hour scrolling through her messages. The intimacy didn't just stop, it evaporated. It felt like I was living with a roommate who tolerated my presence but didn't actually want to engage with it. I spent weeks overanalyzing every interaction, wondering if I had missed a deadline at home or if I'd forgotten an anniversary. The air in our house felt static, like the moments before a thunderstorm. Then she sits me down for a talk this past Tuesday. The sun was barely setting when she asked me to come into the living room. She had cleared the coffee table. She looked composed, almost professional, like she was about to give a quarterly presentation. I felt a surge of adrenaline because I thought she was finally going to tell me what was bothering her. I thought maybe she was depressed or stressed about work, and I was ready to be whatever she needed. I sat down on the edge of the sofa, my heart hammering against my ribs, waiting for the "I'm unhappy" or the "I need space." Instead, she gave me a "we're still young and we can try new things" speech. She talked about how we've been together since our mid-20s and how the world is changing. She used words like exploration and fluidity. It felt like she was reading from a script she'd been writing in her head for months. She looked me in the eye and talked about how much she loved me, but how that love shouldn't be a cage. Then asks for an open marriage. I was not prepared for that and was just stunned. It felt like someone had physically sucked the oxygen out of the room. I stared at the wedding photo on the mantel, then back at her. The woman I had promised my life to was sitting there, calm as can be, asking for permission to sleep with other people. I couldn't come up with anything to say. I was just shocked at the request. The silence stretched out between us, but she didn't seem bothered by it. I think she was encouraged and kept selling it to me. She took my silence for contemplation, or maybe even agreement. She started listing the benefits, how it would bring us closer, how we would have new experiences to talk about, how it would keep our bedroom life from getting stale. It was disgusting. Every word felt like a slap. I sat there watching her lips move, wondering when my wife had been replaced by this stranger who viewed our marriage as an experimental project. By the time she paused for a response, I had gotten me head together. The shock had turned into a cold, hard knot of fury in the pit of my stomach. I was pissed but kept completely calm and told her in no uncertain terms I was not okay with this. I told her that I'm a monogamous man, that I married her for a reason, and that the open lifestyle was a deal-breaker for me. I didn't yell. I didn't call her names. I just stated the fact, I would never agree to share her. She didn't take it well. The enlightened persona slipped, and she started arguing that I was being possessive and unwilling to grow. We went back and forth for a little bit, and the conversation began getting angry, so we both agreed to put it on the shelf for later when we were calm. You could reach out and touch the bad energy in the house after that. The next few days were a living hell. We didn't talk. We didn't eat together. I'd walk into a room and she'd walk out. I spent my time at work in a daze, barely able to focus on my projects, just replaying her speech over and over in my head. I wondered if there was already someone else. I wondered how many people she'd already talked to about this before she brought it to me. The trust wasn't just cracked, it was pulverized. We spoke again last night, and it didn't go well. I had hoped that after a few days of reflection, she'd realize how insane the request was. I thought she might apologize for even bringing it up. Instead, she came at me with even more intensity. She was really selling it hard, talked down my objections as if I were a prude or a child who didn't understand how the modern world worked. She called me jealous and controlling and a bunch of other things I probably shouldn't repeat. She was trying to gaslight me into thinking that my desire for a loyal, exclusive marriage was a character flaw. The tension in the kitchen was unbearable. I could feel my pulse in my temples. She kept pushing and pushing, telling me that I was suffocating her by demanding monogamy. She acted like she was the victim because I was saying no. It really blew up when I finally agreed to it, but did it in a very nasty way. I looked at her and said, "Fine. You want an open marriage? It's open. Go ahead. Go find your new experiences. I hope they're worth it." She took the win though and said, "It will make our marriage stronger." She actually looked relieved, like she had just won a negotiation at work. She reached out like she wanted to hug me, but I stepped back. I told her no. This ends with us divorced. The look on her face changed in a heartbeat. She was instantly angry again and asked why I would say that. She couldn't understand how I could agree and then say the marriage was over. I told her this goes one of two ways. I didn't mince words. I laid it out for her exactly how it would play out. Option 1, I said, is that you go out and you hook up with other men, and I'll hate her for it. I will look at you every day and see a person who betrayed me with my own permission. Our home will become a tomb. I will never touch you again. I will never trust you again. I will live in this house with you until the resentment chokes us both. She tried to scream something at me, but I talked over her. And even if that doesn't happen, even if you never find anyone, I'll start dating. I'm a young, professional man. I'll put myself out there. And I'll meet a woman that wants to have a monogamous relationship with me, and I'll leave you for her. 100%. I will find someone who wants what I want, and the moment I do, you are history. You are opening the door for me to find your replacement. She completely lost it at that point. All the talk about bravery and new things vanished. She threw a glass at me, it shattered against the doorframe, narrowly missing my head. She began screaming at the top of her lungs, calling me every name in the book. She cursed me out so loud the neighbors came out to see what was going on. I could see the lights flicking on in the house next door and people peering through their curtains. I told her if she gets this angry because I'm not okay with my wife FG other men, maybe we should just skip all the BS and separate right now. That's where this is going anyway. I was furious at this point. I realized that the woman I loved was gone, and this person standing in the middle of a pile of broken glass was someone I didn't even recognize. I grabbed my phone, car key, and left. She was still screaming at me as I drove away. I could hear her voice echoing down the street even with my windows up. So now I'm at the Holiday Inn. I drove for an hour with no destination in mind before finally pulling into the parking lot of this hotel. It's soul-crushing. I went to the liquor store next door and bought a bottle of Knob Creek and was up half the night drinking it by the pool on ice from a styrofoam cup. I sat there in the dark, watching the steam rise off the water, wondering how my entire life had dismantled itself in a single week. I felt pathetic, sitting there in my work clothes, drinking bourbon out of a cheap cup while the world slept. Then walked up to the room and passed out. I woke up an hour ago and have been sitting in the room thinking over my whole FG life and where it went wrong. The room smells like cleaning chemicals and regret. I've been staring at the wall, trying to figure out if there were signs I missed, or if she had been planning this for years. She has called more than 20 times, but I have nothing to say to her right now. Every time my phone vibrates, I feel a wave of nausea. She isn't calling to apologize, she's calling to continue the argument. And even if we did talk, where do we even begin to fix this? Can this be fixed? How do you unring a bell like this? Even if she takes it all back, how do I ever feel secure again? How do I know she isn't just going to wait 6 months and ask again? Is going back to talk to her even a good idea? I don't even see what good can come of it. Maybe it really is time to be talking to lawyers. I need to protect myself. I need to figure out what my life looks like without her. We've always gotten along so well, I am at a loss on what to do next. I don't want a divorce, but she's asking me for something I can't give. Any advice is appreciated. Update 1. I went home and we spoke for a few hours. You guys were right. There is someone else. I didn't walk in expecting calm, but I also didn't expect how quickly everything would shift from denial to confirmation. She didn't drag it out once I asked directly. It wasn't a long pause, no elaborate excuse, just a flat admission that landed harder than anything she'd said before. Someone from work. Someone she sees almost every day. Someone she's been talking to enough that this idea didn't just appear out of nowhere. She said she hasn't done anything yet but wants to. That part came out like it was supposed to matter, like it softened the blow. It didn't. If anything, it made it worse because it meant this had been building in her head long enough to turn into a plan. This wasn't curiosity. It wasn't a passing thought. It was something she'd already decided she was willing to risk everything for. He's in an open marriage, or at least that's what she told me. The way she said it sounded rehearsed, like she'd already defended him in her own mind before I ever knew he existed. I asked a couple of basic questions about that, nothing aggressive, just enough to understand what she was basing all of this on. She didn't have anything solid. No proof, no real details about his situation beyond what he told her. It sounded convenient. Maybe it's true, maybe it's not, but it doesn't change anything on my end. What stuck out more than anything was that even after everything that had already happened between us, she still wouldn't let go of it. The fight from the night before, me leaving, the way things blew up, none of that made her step back. If anything, she doubled down. She kept coming back to the same idea that this could work, that it didn't have to ruin anything, that we could somehow add this into our lives without it breaking us apart. At one point she actually said I would never even know it's happening. She said it calmly, like it was a reasonable reassurance. That was probably the moment where any remaining doubt I had about where her head was at disappeared. She genuinely believed that secrecy made it better. That if I didn't see it, didn't hear about it, didn't have it in front of me, then it wouldn't hurt the marriage. I asked her straight up if she hurt herself. She didn't react like it was a ridiculous thing to say. She tried to explain it again, slower this time, like I just needed it framed the right way. She talked about boundaries, about keeping things separate, about how she would make sure it never interfered with our life together. The more she explained it, the clearer it became that we weren't even having the same conversation anymore. She actually said this would make her a better partner. Not in a dramatic way, not trying to provoke anything, just stated it like it was a conclusion she'd already reached. That she would come home happier, more fulfilled, less resentful, more engaged with me. Like this other person was somehow going to improve what we had instead of replacing it piece by piece. She said she still loves me and wants to be with me. That part didn't come out emotional either. No tears, no begging, no panic. Just matter of fact, like she expected it to carry weight on its own. I didn't respond to that. There wasn't anything to respond with that wouldn't turn the conversation into something even worse. I was just looking at her, trying to reconcile the person sitting in front of me with the person I've been with for 8 years. Same face, same voice, same everything on the surface, but none of it lined up with how she was talking. It felt like dealing with a stranger who happened to know all the same details about my life. I told her there is a word for what she's describing and she has lost her mind if she thinks I'd tolerate it. That didn't escalate things the way I expected. She didn't snap back or get loud right away. She just shook her head slightly, like she thought I was being dramatic, like I was refusing to see something obvious. She tried to shift it into something about growth and change, about how relationships evolve, about how people who refuse to adapt end up unhappy. It sounded like something she'd been reading or hearing from somewhere else because it didn't match how we've ever talked to each other before. It didn't sound like her. I asked her how long this has been going on, not physically, but in her head. She gave a vague answer about a few months, maybe longer if she was being honest with herself. Conversations at work, messages outside of work, getting closer over time. Nothing explicit, at least according to her, but enough that it crossed every line that actually matters. There was a point where I asked why she didn't just end the marriage if this is what she wanted. That's when she finally showed some frustration. She said she doesn't want to leave, that she wants both, that it doesn't have to be one or the other. That was the clearest statement she made the entire time. I told her that's not how this works. Not with me. Not in this marriage. Not in any version of reality I'm willing to live in. She tried to argue that I was forcing it into a choice when it didn't have to be one. That I was the one turning it into something extreme. At that point the conversation stopped being productive. It wasn't shouting, it wasn't chaos, it was just two completely different positions that weren't going to meet anywhere in the middle. Every time she tried to soften it, it came back to the same core idea. Every time I responded, it came back to the same line I wasn't willing to cross. I told her she's chosen him and now we're done. That was the first time she looked genuinely caught off guard. Not because she didn't expect consequences, but because I don't think she expected it to be that immediate or that final. She tried to push back on that, saying nothing has actually happened yet, that I'm overreacting to something that hasn't even started. I told her it already started the moment she decided this was something she wanted and something she was willing to defend. She asked if there was anything she could say to change my mind. I didn't give her a long answer. There wasn't one to give. This isn't something that gets negotiated into something acceptable. It either is or it isn't, and for me it isn't. There wasn't another explosion like the night before. No glass breaking, no neighbors getting involved. It was quieter than that, which somehow made it worse. It felt more real, more settled, like the outcome was already decided and we were just going through the motions of confirming it. I went upstairs and started packing more of my stuff. Not everything, just what I needed to not come back right away. She stayed downstairs for most of that. I could hear movement, doors opening and closing, but she didn't come up to stop me. When I brought the bags down, she tried one more time to talk, but it wasn't different from anything she'd already said. Same points, same tone, same certainty that this could somehow work if I would just agree to it. I told her I'd contact her next week to discuss details. I didn't want to get into logistics right then. That's not a conversation that goes anywhere productive when everything else is still this fresh. I packed up more of my stuff and went back to the hotel. The drive felt shorter than it should have. No traffic, no delays, nothing to break up the fact that I was just going from one bad situation back into another one. Our finances are mostly separated, and the house is a rental, thank God. I didn't realize how much that would matter until now. I froze the joint credit cards and the joint savings. It felt like a practical step more than an emotional one. Just something that needed to be done before things got more complicated. I'm going to look into what else needs to be handled, but I figured I'd ask here as well since a lot of you have been through situations like this or know more about it than I do. If there's anything obvious I'm missing, I'd rather deal with it now instead of finding out later. I still can't believe this has happened. 8 years together, 5 married, and it's completely destroyed in one day over pure selfishness. I'm going to finish that bottle and hope tomorrow will be better. I doubt it, but at least it won't be worse. Update 2. Just an update. I'm moving back home today. I have a lawyer and she has drafted an in-home separation agreement, basically separating our finances. The last couple of days have been a blur of practical decisions layered on top of everything that already happened. After that last conversation, I didn't expect to be walking back into the house this soon, but staying in the hotel wasn't sustainable and, more importantly, it wasn't going to move anything forward. This situation isn't going to resolve itself just because I sit somewhere else and avoid it. So I made the calls I needed to make, set up the meeting, and agreed to at least sit down and see what she had to say with other people present. I met with her and her mom last night. It wasn't hostile the way I thought it might be. No raised voices, no scenes, no attempt to rewrite what happened. That part alone made it feel different from the last time we spoke. The entire tone had shifted. It didn't feel like she was trying to convince me of anything anymore, more like she understood she had already pushed things to the edge and was now trying to stop it from going over completely. She is still insisting nothing has happened between her and the other guy. The story hasn't changed from what she told me before, but the way she presented it this time was different. Less defensive, more direct. She didn't get into unnecessary details or try to over-explain. She answered what was asked and didn't try to fill in gaps with anything extra. I don't know if that makes it more believable or if it just makes it harder to pick apart. She said she regrets the open marriage suggestion. Not in a vague, half-committed way, but clearly. She didn't try to reframe it or soften it into something else. She called it what it was and said it was a mistake. She also said she didn't handle my reaction well, which is an understatement considering how that night ended, but at least she didn't try to pretend it didn't happen. She offered full transparency on her phone and iPad. No hesitation there. She said I can check whenever I want, no notice, no conditions. It didn't come across like she was doing me a favor. It sounded more like she understood that trust is gone and this is one of the few ways to even start rebuilding anything. Whether that's enough is a different question, but she didn't argue against it or try to negotiate limits around it. She also said she would find a new job if I want. That part came up after we talked more about the guy from work. It wasn't something I demanded outright in that moment, but she brought it up on her own. She acknowledged that staying in the same environment with him isn't going to help anything. There wasn't any resistance to that idea, no attempt to defend staying there or minimizing the connection. Her mom being there changed the dynamic in a way I didn't expect. There was no attempt to cover for her or shift blame onto me. She told her the truth about what happened, that she was the one who asked for the open marriage. It wasn't dressed up or softened. It was just stated plainly. I get the sense she knew if she didn't say it herself, I would have, and that would have gone a lot worse. Her mom didn't react dramatically, but the disappointment was obvious. She made it clear this isn't how she raised her. It wasn't a lecture, more like a line drawn in the sand. She didn't defend her, didn't excuse it, didn't try to turn it into a misunderstanding. That mattered more than I expected it to. What's making this harder is that she seems sincere. Not performative, not over-the-top emotional, just steady in how she's talking and what she's offering. It lines up with what someone would say if they were actually trying to fix things. That doesn't erase what happened, and it doesn't answer everything, but it complicates it in a way that's harder to dismiss. The contrast between this version of her and what happened last Friday is hard to reconcile. That wasn't a small reaction. That was extreme. The anger, the escalation, the way it spun out of control, it doesn't match the calm, measured way she's acting now. There isn't an easy explanation for that shift, and I didn't get one that really closes that gap. We talked through what moving forward would even look like if I agreed to try. It wasn't about going back to normal. That's not possible right now. The in-home separation is meant to keep things structured while we figure out if there's anything left to rebuild. Separate finances, clear boundaries, no pretending everything is fine. I've agreed to counseling. Not because I think that alone fixes anything, but because it's a step that at least puts everything on the table with someone who isn't involved. There's too much here for it to just be handled between the two of us without it turning into the same circular arguments again. At the same time, the lawyer is still preparing a divorce petition that can be filed at any time. That hasn't changed. I made it clear from the start that this isn't me committing to staying. It's me giving this a limited window to see if there's anything worth saving. Having that paperwork ready isn't about being dramatic, it's about not getting stuck if this goes nowhere. I told her directly that we are not okay. There's no version of this where we just move past it quickly or pretend it didn't happen. I said I have one foot out the door, and that wasn't said to pressure her. It's just the reality of where things stand. She didn't argue that point. I also made it clear that if this marriage is going to be saved, she needs to be the one doing most of the work to get it there. I'm not going to carry this process. I'll meet her part of the way, but I'm not going to drag something forward if she isn't consistently showing that she understands what she did and what it broke. There was no pushback on that either. She agreed without trying to negotiate it down or shift any of that responsibility back onto me. Whether that holds over time is something I'll have to see, but in that moment there wasn't any resistance. I told her in plain terms that I will never agree to any version of an open or poly relationship. That's not something that's up for discussion later, not something that can be revisited once things calm down. It's not what I signed up for, and it's not something I'm going to adapt to. If that's something she still wants at any point, then there's no reason to keep dragging this out. I also told her that if that's the direction she actually wants, then we should skip the back and forth and I'll have my lawyer file. There's no benefit in pretending otherwise or trying to force something that fundamentally doesn't align. The conversation didn't end with some big emotional resolution. There was no moment where everything felt fixed or even close to it. It was more like setting terms for a trial period where both outcomes are still very much on the table. I'm going back to the house today with all of that in place. Separate spaces, clear expectations, and a timeline that doesn't stretch indefinitely. This isn't about giving things another chance in a hopeful way. It's about seeing if there's anything real left to work with before making a final decision. Am I making a mistake? This doesn't commit me to anything, right? The exit door is still open and the path to it is clear. Final update. This will be the last update on this. I'm done. I'm just completely done. This reconciliation attempt couldn't even make it to the end of day 3. I am not going to be giving exact details. I'm sure you will all understand reasons. I found out 2 things, both of which she lied straight to my face about as late as last night. Going back into the house felt controlled on the surface. The structure we agreed on was there, the separation of space, the understanding that this wasn't a return to normal. For a brief stretch it looked like something could at least be evaluated without everything immediately blowing up again. That didn't last. It unraveled fast, and not because of another argument or some new demand, but because the version of events I was being given didn't line up with reality. I had access to what she offered. Phone, iPad, everything she said would be open. I went through it expecting to either confirm what she claimed or find something that made it clear I was wasting my time. What I saw at first didn't immediately prove anything beyond what she had already admitted to. There was flirting. There was familiarity that shouldn't have existed in a marriage. It crossed lines, but it stayed in that gray area she had been leaning on. It was bad, but it was also something she could still point to and say nothing physical had happened. That might have been enough for her argument if that was the whole picture. It wasn't. The more I looked, the more obvious it became that what I was seeing wasn't complete. Gaps where there shouldn't be gaps. Conversations that didn't quite connect. Patterns that suggested something was being redirected somewhere else. It didn't take long to figure out that the transparency she offered had limits she never mentioned. They have another way to communicate and I found it out. Finding that didn't require anything complicated, just paying attention to what didn't add up. Once that piece fell into place, everything else started to look different. The tone, the timing, the way things had escalated over the past few weeks. It wasn't a sudden curiosity like she tried to frame it. It had structure behind it. Planning. Effort. Enough to move it somewhere hidden while still presenting something cleaner on the surface. That led to the second thing I found. She works in an August 5th, Monday through Friday office job. I'm a firefighter/EMT and I work a 24/48 rotating shift. So 3 days a week I'm away from home for a full day at a time. That schedule has been the same for a long time. It's not new, not something that changed recently, not something she had to adjust to. It's just part of how our life has always worked. When you put those 2 things together, it doesn't take much to understand the opportunity that creates. Regular, predictable blocks of time where I'm not there. A workplace connection that already crossed boundaries. A separate channel of communication that was intentionally kept out of the transparent devices. There's only so many ways those pieces fit. I'm not going to lay out specifics. I don't need to, and it doesn't change anything at this point. But once all of that was clear, continuing to believe that nothing physical happened would have meant ignoring everything in front of me. It would have meant choosing a version of events that only works if you actively avoid the obvious conclusion. At this point, believing she was not in a physical relationship with this man would be an act of willful stupidity. Which it probably was all along. That realization didn't come with some big emotional moment. It was quieter than that. More like something settling into place that had been shifting around for days. The pieces stopped moving. There wasn't anything left to figure out. I canceled our marriage counseling appointment this afternoon. There's no point in sitting in a room talking about rebuilding something when the foundation you'd be rebuilding on doesn't exist. Counseling doesn't fix dishonesty. It doesn't replace missing information. It doesn't create trust where there isn't any. I called the lawyer and told her to proceed. Everything we discussed earlier is now moving forward without any pause. The paperwork is being finalized. STBXW, and at this point that label actually fits, will be served next week or the week after depending on how quickly everything processes. I sent the guy that owns the house a letter of non-renewal for the lease. That decision was straightforward. There's no reason to stay tied to a place that's connected to all of this any longer than necessary. The timeline on that will work itself out, but the direction is set. After that, I rented a storage space and moved everything I want to keep into it. Most of it was still boxed from last weekend, which made it easier than it should have been. It didn't take long. Just loading, unloading, making sure anything important was out of the house before things get more complicated. When that was done, I went back to the house and waited. There wasn't any rush to confront her immediately. I wanted everything handled on my end first so there wouldn't be anything left to sort out in the middle of another argument. By the time she got home in the afternoon, everything that needed to be done was already in motion. When she walked in, it didn't take long for her to realize something was different. There's a point where people understand they've been found out even before anything is said. That was obvious right away. I laid out what I had without getting into anything unnecessary. Her reaction was exactly what you'd expect when someone runs out of room to maneuver. The color drained out of her face. There wasn't any attempt to confidently deny it or push back the way she had before. The energy was completely different. The conversation that followed didn't go anywhere useful. It circled around the same core problem that's been there since the beginning of this. No clear truth. No direct acknowledgement of what actually happened. Even then, with everything in front of her, she still wouldn't fully say it. The closest she got was something along the lines of it being over now if anything had happened. That kind of statement doesn't answer anything. It avoids it while trying to move past it at the same time. That might work in some situations. It doesn't work here. I told her I was done. Not in a dramatic way, not to get a reaction, just stating where things are. Done with the lies. Done with the back and forth. Done trying to piece together a version of reality that keeps changing depending on what's convenient in the moment. I told her the paperwork will be filed, and she will be served when it's ready. There wasn't any attempt to negotiate that. No argument about slowing down or reconsidering. The reaction I expected, the one I've seen before, didn't happen this time. I was expecting more of her temper. Something closer to what happened last Friday. It didn't come. Maybe that part is over. Maybe she understands there's nothing left to push against. Or maybe she's just exhausted from it the same way I am. The last part of that conversation was quieter. She broke down, but even then it didn't come with clarity. She said she knows she ruined everything and doesn't even know why she did it. That might be true. It doesn't change anything. She apologized for losing her temper last Friday. She said she doesn't understand that reaction either. There were apologies for everything, but without anything concrete behind them, they don't carry much weight at this point. It's not about hearing the words anymore. Neither of us is happy with how this ends. That much is obvious. This wasn't some long, drawn-out collapse over years. It fell apart fast, and it fell apart because of decisions that didn't need to be made in the first place. But it can't end any other way when there is no truth and no trust. So back at the Holiday Inn just for tonight. No bourbon this time. I'm miserable. But I knew, as much as I wanted to save it, this wasn't going to end any other way. This is just what had to be done. Thanks everyone for all the advice, encouragement, and criticism. In the end you were all pretty much right.
Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.